Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be covering another unique item that I only recently just found. I was pretty excited. I thought it was a Shaco, a Harlequin Crest Shaco. I thought it was a Shaco, but it was not a Shaco. It was instead the Deathless Visage. The Deathless Visage is pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. It is a Bone Spear specific unique item, and let's go over it together. First off, it has a bonus total armor value, which is nice for when you're doing on-level content, and it does roll as high as 10.1%. Can get a little bit higher than that if you can get the eye level closer to 820, but that is what I've got is 4.6 to 10.9. It does give a bonus to physical damage. Mine rolled pretty low at 12%, and Bone Spear is indeed a physical damage attack. So when you put this on, see 24,201, and when I put it on, it goes to 25,181. So we get a nice little bump to the physical damage of our Bone Spear. We also get a 24% critical strike damage with Bone Skills, which goes all the way up to 31.5%. There's definitely some room for improvement on this particular helmet, so I'll be happy to see some, additional versions of this eventually. Hopefully I'll find some more with maybe some better stats. Because I am a Bone Spear Necromancer, and so I would like to have a higher physical damage on that. Would definitely be nice, and a higher crit would definitely be nice as well. And Bone Spear is all about crits, so we definitely want as high crit damage as we can get. It also has 27 maximum essence, which is very important for the Necromancer. In fact, it's so important for the Bone Spear Necromancer that you'll be utilizing things like the Requiem Ring, which gives you 5 essence per active minion, as well as pretty much anything that can give you more essence, like things like the Unliving Energy, which I don't have maxed out right now because I'm a silly head. I don't know why don't I have that maxed out. I need to take some points from somewhere and beef that up a little bit more. And then also you get basically damage per essence with the Ossified Essence key passive. So this is your Bone Skills deal 1% increased damage for each point of essence you have over 50 upon cast. So basically you get 1% per essence. So a skill like this that gives me 3 essence is giving me 3% damage basically anytime I cast my ability. So I have something like this, which is Death's Reach, which gives me 4% per point for distant enemies. And you know what the truth is? I should probably just stack those here, because these are going to give me so much more damage output for all monsters and not just distant. And I could throw 1 point back into that. I also get more essence in other ways, like for instance I have actual like Paragon tree stuff that gives me essence, like I've got maximum essence here, 4 maximum essence, 4 maximum essence, and so forth and so on. And the more essence that I get 24 maximum essence here while I'm casting my abilities. The more essence that I get, the more damage the ability does, to the point of absurdity. As of right now, I'm currently at 156 plus 24 from the ability, which gets me to a pretty massive amount of essence. By the time I'm done and I fire off my Bone Spear a couple times, I get like my temporary buffs in, I'm close to 200 essence, which is about 150% extra damage to Bone Spear, which is pretty massive. So the fact that this one, which is a Bone Spear ability, has maximum essence on it is very important to this particular build. Now, the meat and potatoes of the item is the Bone Spear leaves behind echoes as it travels that explode, dealing 1,335 damage. Now, that does scale up to 1,507, which doesn't seem like a whole lot, but it does. It is actually 3 explosions, which is very interesting. Now, one thing I want to show you, though, is 2 items that I have on hand. So this is a razor blade, and this is a razor blade. This is an 810 plus 25 razor blade, which has a maximum thorns of 13,321, which is pretty amazing. This is a lower level white razor blade that has a maximum thorns of 5,927, which is not as amazing. The reason why I'm showing you this is because flat damage numbers scale really badly in this game. So if you find this item at a lower level, the damage output from the explosions is not going to scale very well with level. So as you level up, you're going to very quickly over-level the explosion damage. So if you really want to find this at a higher level with a higher damage number. Now, of course, that does go up when you upgrade it. I've already upgraded mine 5 times, of course. So mine is currently at 1,335, which it was not when I found it. This particular item does have some pretty cool flavor text, which is Rathma is endless. He was the first ancient and will remain at the end. He is the master of the great cycle of being. When death comes for him, why should he fear it? Vauntus Acolyte of Rathma. Sorry, dog started barking. So let's take this outside real quick, and let's actually utilize this so you can see what it does. We don't need any monsters nearby for you to see the effect. It's actually pretty cool. So when you fire off your Bone Spear, Bone Spear is actually a pretty complicated ability, to be honest. So when you fire off your Bone Spear, first you have the initial projectile. The initial projectile travels outward from the Bone Spear and does basically its piercing damage. Then you have a return projectile, which comes back, and that return projectile is 3 additional bone splinters, which can go up to 5 if you get the perk. And those 5 bone splinters dish a pretty nice amount of damage as well. Then the explosions, or the ghost echoes that come from the ability, also spawn, and they explode after the projectiles come back. So in sequence, it is Bone Spear, Splinters, then explosions, and the explosions explode in sequence from 1, 2, 3. And they dish out a pretty large radius. They're about the same size as a corpse explosion. And as you can see, they can dish out some pretty nice damage. Now, my Bone Spear already dishes out pretty nice damage. To be perfectly honest, I don't necessarily need this to make my Bone Spear do more damage. But it's very interesting from an aspect of AoE damage. So the explosions are pretty nice in terms of hitting out, multiple damage points. So, you get the initial spike of damage, you get the explosions, which come out, and then you get the little bone splinters, and all of it adds up to some pretty serious damage output in terms of ripping monsters to shreds. For a Bone Spear Necromancer, it might not necessarily be the absolute end-all, be-all best item for damage output. But to me, it kind of works very well in tandem with the way that Bone Spear works, and let me explain. So Bone Spear is a very powerful single-hit punch. And then the returning splinters dish out a pretty decent amount of damage, but they won't hit everything. Now, if it's up against a wall, if your monster's up against a wall and you shoot off your Bone Spear, you notice that it just instantly returns. Now, you get no explosions. So when you're shooting a monster against the wall, you get nothing. So this is really for when you're shooting your Bone Spear at max distance, and the bone splinters are going to spread out to their maximum range, which means they're going to hit the least number of targets. It's been my experience that with Bone Spear, you definitely want to attack at a optimal range, or at a monster that is currently at the wall. So what do I mean by optimal range? Well, if you have a monster, like for instance this one right here, and you stand at optimal range, you get maximum damage output from being at optimal range. But everything in between that tends to get kind of mediocre damage at best. And the bone splinters, the echoes, seem to do pretty decent damage as far as like dealing with those echoes. Now, how much damage is that, comparatively to Bone Spear? It's a lot less. But it is 3 explosions, and the 3 explosions are dishing out a pretty decent amount of damage each, which do add up to a pretty decent overall damage, which is multiplied by all of your effects, of course, because it still counts as bone. You got all your bone buffs, your bone damage buffs are coming into play here, and it's making it do more. So if you add it all up, it's like 1,300 times 3, so you're talking about like, what is it, like 3,000 some odd, 3,900 damage, which is pretty close to the bone splinters. If you take a look at the bone splinters on my Bone Spear, they only do about 5,760. So it's very close to the damage that the bone splinters are putting out, not counting the splintering passive that aspect that I have here, which gives 205% to the splinters. So it's still giving a pretty nice amount of damage, especially when you compare it to the splinters. It just doesn't do as much as the splinters, and it doesn't do as much as the Bone Spear. But it's interesting to consider it from the point of view of the Bone Spear is your big single target hit, the bone splinters are your little AoE piercing hits, and the explosion then becomes your bigger explosion that does less damage but to a wider area, which basically means that you have 3 different damage types going on at the same time. You've got your single target, your AoE, and then you've got your massive AoE with low damage, which is going to take care of pretty much any monster that's not, you know, like within the scope of the first 2 hits. So if they don't get hit by the Bone Spear, they don't get hit by the fragments, then they're definitely going to get hit by the explosions. And if they're weak enough, the explosions will take them out, which is pretty darn cool. We also need to talk about the graphic on this helmet. It's freaking amazing looking. The graphic is this really awesome skull, and this is not just my transmog. If I switch to my my default look wearing this helmet, you'll notice that this is the way that this helmet looks. You can, of course, dye it, which is really interesting. So if you go to the, I believe it's the Bone Weave helm. No. The Archon helm is the graphic for this one. You can dye it various different colors, which is pretty cool. I definitely prefer blue, but it does have some very interesting dye options, I think, especially with the cloth underneath of the helmet, the bone face. All of it just looks really cool in various colors, and my personal preference is blue. That's why my character is blue. But it's just a really awesome looking graphic for a helmet. And for some reason my sword changed. I really like this sword. This looks really cool. My transmogs keep undoing themselves. Now, as far as rarity goes, this particular helmet does seem to be pretty rare. I've only found one of them so far in the entire time I've been playing. There are definitely items that are more common than this, like, for instance, the Blood Artisan's Curios, Cough Cough, which I found 9 of so far, which I even put a meme counter up on the thing because I keep finding them, like, every 5 minutes. Whereas this one I've only found 1 so far, total. So I think that's pretty much it when it comes to the Deathless Visage, and yeah, it's a pretty nice little item for a Bone Spear Necro. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, and keep watching.